Hey everybody, I'm Bede, aka the Terrible Australian at supermarcy.com, and this is the 4th edition of my 2015 MIFF video reviews. For this one, I will be reviewing the Austrian horror film Goodnight Mommy, and as well as the Stranger Than Fiction documentary Finders Keepers. So let's get right into it. Now, as you all know from previous editions of the video, I got my MIFF guide here, so I can read all the synopsises of the two films I'll be reviewing today. So in other words, so I don't butcher them. So let's get right into it. First up, Goodnight Mommy. A cerebral nerve strainer that builds from slow burn to unfathomable brutality. Goodnight Mommy starts with twin boys in an isolated house in the country, waiting for their mother's return. When she finally comes back, her head wrapped in bandages after plastic surgery, nothing is as it was before. Stern and distant, she shuts the family off from the outside world, which starts the boys thinking that this woman is not their mother at all. Now, this one is definitely been getting a lot of buzz because the first trailer, I guess the first English language version of this, well, not English language, the first trailer for English language audiences was recently released a few weeks ago, and that trailer's been getting a lot of buzz, and some saying that it's one of the best trailers ever. And I actually watched that trailer after watching this film, and I'd say it's a really effective trailer that does showcase what the film is like. But I should state beforehand that this isn't some this is definitely a very slow burn horror film. This is definitely one that's sort of more in the vein of ones like, Let the Right One In, or kind of those sort of more classical type of horror films from the 70s, in which the horror isn't just like jumping out of the shadows and scaring you, or someone with a butcher knife or anything like that. It's more of sort of like a film that sort of, as it's sort of from the very beginning right up to the end, the intensity just gets more and more and more suffocating, and then it just becomes a bit unsettling and nerve-wracking. So it's a movie that's more horror film that's more designed to sort of get under your skin, and it did for me for most part. And I just thought that it was a pretty well crafted, really creepy and unsettling horror film. Like, this is one that's definitely not going to be for everyone. Like I said, it's a bit of a slow burn, and that might in some way kind of test people's patience. And at the same time, it's not a film that sort of like, brings anything particularly new to the table. But what it does though is still pretty, but it still does it very well. And I have to say, like I said, it's a pretty well crafted horror film. The performances are really good. The two young boys, twin brothers, whose names I can't think of at the moment, I thought they were really good, and it's pretty much, this film is pretty much a free-hander. Like, it's just the two boys and their mother, and of course you get some little side characters who pop in every now and again, but that's only for like, a few seconds. It's really sort of about the relationship between these two twin brothers and their mother that's definitely the sort of the driving force of the film, and it's pretty unsettling. And what I really liked is that there's sort of a mundane feel to it. Like, there's nothing it's not a sort of a dark looking film or anything like that. It's very bright and sunny, but there's sort of this sort of very isolating feeling to it, and an uneasiness to it, and it kind of that sort of gives it that sort of creepy vibe. And as we sort of go along, and as the story progresses, a lot of stuff happens, which I won't spoil, but it definitely sort of sends the audience on a ride, kind of wondering like where the story's going to go. And there's something that sort of happens like halfway during the film that I actually thought was pretty interesting and quite cool for a type of sort of turn within the story. But you'll know what I mean when you see it. But what really sort of knocks this film back for me just a bit, and stops it from being, say, a really great horror film, like, even though it's a really good one, but a really great horror film, is that there's something that happens in the third act. And again, I'm not going to spoil what it is. I did feel like that it wasn't necessary, and it didn't really add anything to it. And in a way, it's kind of like it kind of reminds me of what French horror films try to do sometimes. They try to sort of be a bit more smarter than they are by doing something in the third act that's supposed to be much, thought-provoking or sort of add some kind of layer to the movie. But the film has kind of already got some really interesting layers and complexity to it in terms of the relationship between mothers and their children and all that. But then when this sort of thing happens in the third act, I just didn't feel like it was really necessary, and it also kind of did cheapen the film a bit. And it's something that we've seen many times before in other horror films. And I kind of feel really bad that the film's directors, whose names are... Oh, I can't... hold on one second. But the directors of the film, whose names I can't find at the moment... Oh, yeah. Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala. Like, they're both really talented filmmakers. This isn't the first thing I've ever seen from them. They direct this film really well. They know how to ratchet up the tension and get really good performances out of their characters, and also create these really creepy really creepy moments. But them sort of resorting to this one thing, I did find, like I said, it cheapened the film, and I kind of wish that they didn't go there, because, like I said, it's something that's been done many times before, and it kind of lessens the impact a bit of the film. So in that way, it's kind of disappointing. But that being said, though, it's still a really good horror film. I definitely recommend it, especially if you sort of love more sort of unsettling horror films, or ones that sort of take a sort of their time telling their stories and their creep factor and all that. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I'd say, it does deserve the praise that it's gotten. But at the same time, I don't want to overhype it too much. I don't want to say this is like the scariest horror film you're going to see so far this year. I'm not going to say that at all. But it's for what it is. It's still a pretty solid, really good, and pretty creepy horror film, nonetheless. Do I think it's the best of the year? No, mainly because I do feel like it does have some problems. But on its own, it's still a really good film that I still recommend horror fans to check out, but only if you're sort of more into slow burn type of horror films. So if I had to give this film a rating, I give it 4 out of 5, and I definitely would recommend it. Now on to the next film, which is the documentary Finders Keepers. John Wood lost his leg in an airplane accident and kept the appendage in a barbecue grill inside a storage locker. See, I told you this documentary story was pretty strange. When his payments on the locker lapsed, bargain hunter Shannon Wishant, I probably pronounced his last name wrong, so forgive me, won the contents in an auction and refused to give the leg back to Wood. It could be a business opportunity, said Wishant, who wanted to use the severed leg as a tourist attraction. As you could tell, the story behind this documentary is incredibly bizarre, but to be honest, I love documentaries that sort of take a topic that is so bizarre and strange, and that's as the old saying, truth is stranger than fiction, and make it a subject of a film. And this is definitely one of the best ones sort of to do that. And what I really liked about this film, and I think it's a really great documentary, and what I really loved about this film is that when it starts off being like that, it's kind of like this really absurd and bizarre kind of documentary, and you wonder how on earth could this have happened? And the fact that there's one guy, this bargain hunter, who finds this severed leg and wants to use it for business, for his own business, and make a bit of a name of himself. And then you got this other guy who the leg belongs to. He just wants it back, and how this sort of became like a huge news story. And I mean, the guys even went on to like on the news and TV, and even went on Judge Mathis as well to try to sort of, and as well go into court and to try to fight the ownership of this leg. Like, it's such a really bizarre story, and the film tackles that extremely well. But what makes this documentary sort of even better is, like, besides doing that, there's a lot more to it than just that story. It's a story, like, about broken families and and broken dreams, and it's a story about, you know, a family that has been John Wood's family that's been torn apart by tragedy, and sort of him going into depression, and also getting into drugs and alcohol, but also, and him sort of being, you know, being tossed away by his family, and also as the story goes along, and it's about the healing of a family as well. And also you see the character of Shannon Wishon. You think it's like, oh, he's kind of just like this unlikable, just opportunist who just wants to look out for fame. But then as the film goes on, we get really empathetic to his plight as well, as, yeah, he's kind of getting the fame that he wants, but at the same time people kind of treat him as a joke. And in a way, like, he kind of, I don't want to say he deserves it, but the film does a good job at making us feel sorry for him, and like even empathetic to what he's doing. And the film really tackles all these sort of things, like the healing, like tragedy and healing, and, you know, sort of the downside of fame, and looking at these themes through the lens of this really bizarre story. But most importantly, the story of these two men who are polar opposite of each other. The film does a really great job at exploring that, and by the end of it, you besides, you know, being a very funny and absurd story, you're also incredibly moved by it as well. And the film just does a really great job at just handling all that rather superbly. And it doesn't surprise me at all when I found that after watching this documentary that the doco was produced by the same people, not directed, but produced by the same people behind The King of Kong and Undefeated, and those documentaries were fantastic. And in a lot of ways, you kind of see, you know, familiar elements in those two documentaries and this one, from both a sort of funny, absurd angle, but also a really sort of moving story about people, and about the film, like I said, this film just does a great job of handling all that and putting in a sort of balancing it out in a way that's just terrific. And this one is definitely one of the biggest surprises for me. Again, like a couple of the films that I'm seeing at MIFF this year, this is one I didn't even heard of before until I read it in the MIFF guide. And when I sort of read it, it just sounded really interesting, and I thought, okay, I'll add it in there as kind of like one of my documentaries I'm planning on seeing. And this one just has so far ended up, I was just really amazed by this doco, and it's definitely one of the best films I've seen so far at MIFF this year, and it's just terrific and a huge surprise, and it's one that I highly recommend everyone to check out. So if I had to give Finders Keepers a rating, I give it 4.5. It's really terrific stuff, and I highly recommend it, especially if you love documentaries or even just docos about bizarre true stories. So, but like I said, besides being a story about that, there's a lot more to it that just makes it much more fulfilling as a film. So, yep, that's it. That's my video review, my 4th edition of my MIFF video reviews. I hope you guys all liked it. Keep a lookout very soon for my 5th edition, in which I'll be reviewing the indie drug addict drama Heaven Knows What, and as well as the Australian documentary Gaby Baby. So keep a lookout for that, and I'll see you guys all later. See you everyone. Bye.